5 Chinese luxury EVs are now reachable from U.S. soil, parked in Canadian showrooms, priced below their German rivals, and loaded with technology that Mercedes and BMW do not offer at any price. The uncomfortable part is not the cars themselves, it is what they reveal about how much Western buyers have been overpaying for the word premium. One of these 5 could realistically collapse resale values across an entire segment, and most people have not even heard its name yet. The NIO ET9 enters this story as the technology demonstrator, the vehicle designed not to outsell anyone immediately, but to make every reviewer and every cross-shopping buyer recalibrate what flagship sedan means in terms of onboard systems. Its most visually distinctive decision is the integration of a full LiDAR sensor array into the roofline, not as a protruding module bolted onto an otherwise conventional body, but sculpted flush into the architecture, treated as a deliberate design element. That matters in buyer psychology because it reframes the entire sensor debate. It signals a manufacturer that considers autonomous capable hardware a native feature, not an expensive option tier, and it forces a quiet comparison. Tesla's camera-only philosophy suddenly reads as either principled minimalism or strategic cost-saving depending on the viewer's existing bias. And Mercedes' own sensor placement on the EQS starts to look like an engineering afterthought given a polite cosmetic cover. In segment positioning, the ET9 targets the Mercedes EQS and the BMW i7, vehicles that cost well into 6 figures in Canada and deliver undeniable material quality, but increasingly face the question of whether their digital architecture justifies the premium or merely inherits the premium from a combustion-era badge hierarchy. But here is where the first crack appears in the surface. And it is a crack that will reappear with every vehicle on this list in different forms. NIO's entire brand identity in China is built not around the car as an isolated product, but around an ownership ecosystem, battery swap stations that replace a depleted pack in under 5 minutes, NIO houses that function as owner lounges in major cities, a concierge service model that treats after-sales as hospitality. None of that infrastructure exists in Canada at any meaningful scale. A battery swap network requires capital deployment, municipal permitting, and demand density that a launch phase brand cannot achieve in year 1. So, the ET9, as a physical object, may be the most impressive machine in this entire list. But as a product, meaning the total experience a buyer actually lives with, it arrives incomplete. And the question of how incomplete will depend on commitments that NIO has not yet made public for the Canadian market. Can a vehicle that was designed to be half of an ecosystem survive as a whole product on its own? NIO's answer will matter, but the next manufacturer's answer matters more, because it has something NIO does not. The largest EV production base on Earth backing it up. The BYD Yangwang U7 plays a fundamentally different role than the ET9. This is not a startup with a vision deck and venture funding. BYD delivered more than 3 million electrified vehicles globally last year. It manufactures its own batteries, its own semiconductors, and significant portions of its own supply chain. The Yangwang sub-brand exists to answer a question that haunts every high-volume manufacturer and has historically defeated most of them. Can a company known for affordable mass-market products convince a buyer to pay 6 figures for something with the same parent logo buried in the corporate fine print? The U7's most striking engineering feature is its individually controlled quad-motor drive train. 1 motor per wheel, enabling torque vectoring precise enough that the vehicle can execute a controlled pivot turn on flat ground with near zero turning radius. Whether any owner will perform that maneuver on a Canadian street is almost irrelevant. What matters is the signal. BYD's engineering ceiling is not defined by its price floor reputation. The implicit argument against the Porsche Taycan and the upper trims of the Tesla Model S is not just about matching performance specifications, but about exceeding feature density at an equivalent or lower price point. The weakness, though, cuts deeper than specifications. Luxury is partly rational and partly tribal. A brand that sells a compact hatchback for the equivalent of $20,000 in Southeast Asia faces an enormous credibility gap when asking for 5 or 6 times that in a Canadian showroom where the buyer's neighbor drives a Porsche. Heritage luxury consumers do not buy only what the car does, they buy the social confidence that the badge communicates something recognized and scarce. BYD's manufacturing scale, which is its greatest strategic asset, simultaneously undermines the exclusivity that premium pricing traditionally requires. That tension between rational value and social signaling is one of the deepest fault lines in this entire market shift. And here is a partial answer to the service question raised at the beginning. BYD, unlike NIO, has the financial scale and the global logistics footprint to establish physical service points relatively quickly. It already operates in over 70 markets. The question is not whether BYD can build a Canadian service network, but whether it will invest to build one at the Yangwang luxury tier, with dedicated facilities, trained technicians for a flagship platform, and parts inventory stocked domestically rather than shipped per incident from Shenzhen. Volume brands entering luxury have historically underinvested in top-tier service because the unit economics are brutal at low initial volumes. That pattern is worth watching closely because the next vehicle on this list has a potential structural advantage on exactly this point, and the reason involves a corporate connection most buyers will not immediately recognize. If there is one vehicle on this list that legacy automakers should lose sleep over, it is probably not the most expensive or the most futuristic. It is the Zeekr 001. Zeekr operates under the Geely umbrella, the same Chinese conglomerate that owns Volvo Cars, and Polestar, holds a major stake in Mercedes-Benz Group, and has spent 15 years absorbing European engineering methodology, safety culture, and supplier relationships. That lineage matters enormously in the Canadian context, because it means Zeekr does not arrive as an unknown entity, building everything from scratch. It arrives with access to Volvo's crash test engineering knowledge, to established relationships with European Tier 1 suppliers, and to a corporate parent that already understands Transport Canada's regulatory framework through Volvo's decades of Canadian operations. The 001's defining visual statement is its shooting brake silhouette, a long, sweeping roof line that merges sedan proportions with hatchback utility in a body style that European manufacturers have historically reserved for limited production models or performance-oriented variants. That shape is a confidence signal. This is a brand willing to avoid the safe, predictable crossover SUV format that dominates EV launches and instead bet on a distinctive form factor. In direct market positioning, the 001 sits where the Tesla Model 3 Performance, the Polestar 2, and the BMW i4 compete, but it arrives with a combination of interior material quality, standard equipment breadth, and rear seat space that makes those competitors feel selectively generous rather than comprehensively finished. Now, the localization problem. Every vehicle on this list was developed for the Chinese market, where the digital ecosystem is entirely different. Different mapping providers, different voice assistant platforms, different payment integrations, different streaming services, different app stores, a navigation system that responds flawlessly to Mandarin voice commands in Hangzhou, but stumbles over Canadian French pronunciation in Montreal, or that cannot integrate with Apple CarPlay in a way that feels seamless rather than grafted, becomes a daily source of friction that no amount of seat leather or ambient lighting can offset. This is not a cosmetic issue. In a market where Tesla has conditioned buyers to expect software fluidity as a baseline, a clunky or half-localized infotainment system does not read as a minor shortcoming. It reads as a fundamental misunderstanding of the product. Zeekr's Geely connection provides resources to solve this, but solving it requires investment in regional software teams, ongoing localization maintenance, and a commitment to update cadence that matches or exceeds what North American buyers experience from established brands. Whether that commitment has been made or budgeted is not yet visible. And this localization challenge becomes even more significant with the next vehicle, because its entire identity is built around the software layer, and the company providing that software carries a name that triggers an entirely separate set of concerns in North America. The Avatar 12 is, by design, the most polarizing vehicle on this list. It is a joint venture involving Changan Automobile, CATL for battery systems, and Huawei for the intelligent driving and cockpit software platform. That last name is the one that reshapes every conversation about this car. But before addressing it, the product itself deserves examination on its own terms. The interior commits fully to a screen-centric philosophy. A wide, curved display assembly dominates the dashboard. Physical controls are reduced to near extinction, and the vehicle's personality is defined more by interface fluidity than by leather grain or wood veneer selection. For a buyer whose reference point for luxury is a responsive, visually rich digital environment, someone who evaluates a cockpit the way they evaluate a high-end tablet, the Avatar 12 makes a coherent argument. For a buyer who associates premium experience with tactile resistance, the satisfying click of a precision machine dial, and the deliberate absence of screens, it reads as a philosophical disagreement, not an upgrade. That split is intentional. The Avatar 12 is not trying to please everyone. It is trying to define a position, software-first luxury, and accept that this position will alienate traditional premium buyers while attracting a cohort that legacy brands are not yet serving well. The Huawei dimension, however, cannot be separated from the political environment. Governments across North America and Europe have restricted Huawei's involvement in telecommunications infrastructure on national security grounds. Whether those restrictions are proportionate or politically motivated is a debate that will not be settled here, but the practical consequence for the Avatar 12 is real. A vehicle built around Huawei's Harmony OS cockpit system, running Huawei's autonomous driving stack, and presumably communicating with Huawei's cloud infrastructure will face questions in the Canadian regulatory environment that go beyond safety certification. Data collection, storage jurisdiction, and access permissions become procurement-level concerns when the vehicle's software provider is subject to active governmental scrutiny. This does not make the Avatar 12 a bad car. It makes it a car that exists in a political context, and that context is part of the ownership experience whether the buyer thinks about it or not. Here is the second layer of the after-sale answer promised at the beginning. For a Huawei integrated vehicle, software updates are not just feature improvements. They are the mechanism through which the car's driving capabilities, safety patches, and regulatory compliance evolve. If geopolitical friction between China and Canada escalates, a scenario that is not hypothetical given recent diplomatic tensions, the continuity of that update pipeline becomes a legitimate ownership risk. Not a certainty of failure, but a dependency on political stability that a Mercedes or Tesla buyer simply does not carry. A buyer evaluating the Avatar 12 is, whether they realize it or not, also evaluating their confidence in the stability of international relations over a 5 to 7 year ownership period. That is a new kind of purchase variable, and it has no precedent in the Canadian automotive market. The final vehicle on this list carries the same Huawei entanglement but aims at an even more rarefied target, and in doing so, exposes the ultimate test of whether technology can substitute for heritage at the very top of the market. The Maestro S800, developed within Huawei's automotive partnership ecosystem, does not aim at the broad luxury market. It aims at the narrowest, most protected, and most psychologically fortified segment in the industry, the space occupied by the Mercedes Maybach EQS SUV, the BMW i7 xDrive 60, and the Rolls-Royce Spectre. This is not a volume play. It is a prestige declaration. The vehicle's defining physical feature is its rear cabin architecture. The back seat is not a passenger accommodation. It is the primary ownership experience. Executive class seats recline to near-flat positions with integrated climate zoning, massage systems, and individual entertainment displays. The rear door opens to a compartment designed for the person who is driven, not the person who drives. Every surface, every control placement, Every lighting angle in that cabin is calibrated against one specific benchmark: the experience of sitting in the back of a Maybach. That directness of intent is both the car's greatest strength and its most revealing vulnerability, because ultra-luxury buyers are not fundamentally value shoppers. A person cross-shopping a Maybach is not comparing feature lists or counting massage zones. They are buying certainty that the vehicle will be serviced by technicians who answer the phone on the first ring, that the brand will exist and support the car in a decade, that resale value will hold within a predictable band, and that the badge on the hood communicates something legible to the world. The Maestro S800 can match or exceed the physical specification of a Maybach. What it cannot yet provide is a single data point of Canadian resale history, a single year of long-term reliability data in a North American climate, or a service network with the depth to handle a catastrophic component failure in, say, Winnipeg in January. Trust at the top of the market is not earned by product launches. It is earned by years of consistent delivery, and the Maestro S800 has 0 years on the Canadian clock. And now, the full answer to the question that was opened in the first minute. What actually happens after a Canadian buyer signs for one of these vehicles? The reality decomposes into layers, and none of them are simple. Service networks are the most immediate gap. At launch, most of these brands will operate through a handful of flagship locations in Toronto, Vancouver, and possibly Montreal. A buyer in Calgary, Halifax, or anywhere outside those corridors faces a logistical reality that no brochure addresses. If something breaks, the car may need to be flatbedded hundreds of kilometers to reach a trained technician. For a vehicle purchased as daily transportation, not a weekend novelty, that gap is not an inconvenience. It is a deal-altering factor. Parts availability follows a predictable early market pattern. Consumables, brake pads, filters, tires will likely be sourced through global suppliers and available domestically. But structural body panels, battery modules, proprietary electronic control units, and platform-specific suspension components will initially be shipped from China per incident, with lead times measured in weeks. Insurance companies understand this dynamic and price accordingly. If a collision repair that would take 10 days on a BMW takes 6 weeks on a Zeekr because of part shipping, the insurer calculates higher rental coverage, higher total loss probability, and ultimately higher premiums. A buyer comparing sticker prices without factoring insurance differentials is comparing incomplete numbers. Software localization remains uneven across all 5 brands. Voice recognition tuned for Mandarin phonetics does not automatically transfer to English or French-Canadian accents. Map databases require ongoing licensing agreements with local providers. App ecosystems, charging network integration, parking payment, roadside assistance require partnerships that take time and negotiation to establish in a new market. The promise of a connected vehicle is only as strong as the local connectivity, and in Canada's first years of Chinese EV availability, that connectivity will have visible gaps. Imagine a specific scenario. A buyer in suburban Ottawa purchases a Zeekr 001. 6 months in, the infotainment system receives an over-the-air update that improves the Chinese market voice assistant, but inadvertently degrades the English language navigation routing. The fix requires a patch from the regional software team. If that team is 5 engineers in Toronto, the patch arrives in weeks. If the localization is managed from Hangzhou with Canadian input as a secondary priority, it could take months. That difference, the depth of local software commitment, is invisible at the point of sale and decisive during ownership. The same scenario, scaled up to a safety-critical driving assistance update for an Avatar 12 or a Maestro S800, carries higher stakes. A delayed safety patch on an autonomous driving system is not a minor software inconvenience. It is a regulatory and liability exposure that the brand, the dealer, and the owner all share. Resale value is the final unknown, and it is the one that transforms an exciting purchase into a financial calculation. Every vehicle on this list has 0 resale history in North America. A buyer putting 100,000 Canadian dollars into a Neo ET9 or a Yangwang U7 is making a bet with no comparable data point. If the brand establishes itself and demand grows, depreciation may be moderate. If the brand retreats from the market, as several Chinese automakers have done in other export regions, the vehicle becomes an orphan, and its residual value collapses. This is not speculation. It is the documented history of market exits by brands like Brilliance, Landwind, and early-phase MG in certain European markets. The difference is that those were budget vehicles with small individual losses. A stranded $100,000 flagship is a different magnitude of buyer exposure. But the deepest shift happening along that border is not about any single vehicle. It is about what happens to consumer expectations once these products become visible, even partially, even to a market that cannot yet buy them freely. Canada is functioning as an awkward, unplanned showroom. Close enough to the United States that every review, every owner experience, every parking lot sighting becomes a data point in an American buyer's mental model of what premium electric value should look like. And that model, once it moves, does not move back. The conflict unfolding is not only about electrification. It is a conflict over how premium value is defined, who holds the authority to define it, and whether shielding consumers from competition is the same thing as protecting them. Two questions are worth answering with specifics, not just instinct. Of these 5 vehicles, which one goes into a personal garage tomorrow if it were available and fully supported in Canada, and what is the specific reason? And which one looks undeniably compelling on a screen but would not yet earn enough trust to sign a purchase agreement, and what would need to change before it could? The reasons reveal more than the names.